Welcome, everybody, to episode number 18 of the Scholastic Sitdown. My name is Dylan Ward. That's Luke Jordan. We're both sitting down and both ready to talk about the Scholastic Hockey League. And boy, we've got a lot to cover today, Luke. How was your week?
Well, my week was just like the SHL's, busy.
Yeah.
So we're gonna have a lot of things to recap, and I'm looking forward to us talking about some games, especially that I was able to be at and witness with my very own eyes and experience the atmospheres. So not only that, but we also have some big news to drop later on in the episode. So if you're just clicking on, you're not exactly tuned in right now, make sure you turn that up a gear and get things going because this is going to be a very fun episode.
Yes, it is. We're going to recap the week. We'll talk to former SHL player, now broadcaster for the SHL network, Andrew Rubin. We'll look at outside the SHL, and that's going to be a fun segment, Luke, because all of the leagues we cover have officially completed their regular seasons, and we know all the playoff matchups in the first round of those. We're going to preview next week, or this week, which is the final week of regular season play in the SHL. And we've got our question of the week and trivia. So, Luke, let's just get things started right away here with the week recap. And if I remember correctly, we did film last Tuesday, so we were able to cover that St. Ignatius versus Carmel game already.
Yep.
Did I have that right? So let's jump right into Wednesday, January the 22nd. We saw two games. Uh, yeah, and two big games. Both Glenbrook teams were at home. Let's start out with the Glenbrook South Titans hosting the St. Viator Lions. Lions took a 2-1 lead after the first period in this one. The Titans get one back in the second period to tie things up, score two in the third, including an empty netter to seal the victory. And for the St. Viator team, who's been pretty good in the standings. Glenbrook South actually wins the season series over them, 2-1. And Luke, if you remember, you broadcasted the very first game way back in, that's got to be October, right? Maybe September, probably October. The Titans won 3-2, and then St. Viator won 6-3, and the Titans win 4-2 here.
Yeah, no, I do remember that first game because still to this day of the 2024-2025 hockey season, that was one of my favorite games I've gotten to do because it was just those teams play each other so well when they meet with each other. And it's not that St. Viator plays down level, it's that GBS plays up a level. So they always give you these tight contests. Yes, this was a two-goal game, but like you said, empty netter at the end. It came down to the wire again where St. Viator had a chance on the power play and just couldn't convert. But this was one of two just great matchups on the Wednesday that we highlighted last week as one of the days to watch out for. Not too often you get matchups like these on a Wednesday, and we were glad we did.
Well, the second one was one of the two SHL game of the weeks last week. It was Nutria Green at Glenbrook North. And what we said was the first complete three-period matchup between these two teams this season. And these two teams better get used to playing each other because they've got a few more next week. But in this one, Nutria Green ends up taking it 3-2, the final score. It was a close game all the way until the very end, and Nutria ends up scoring the game winner with 2:40 left in the third period on the road to get the 1-0 season series lead over GBN, which at this point, this late in January, it feels weird that that's the only game of the season series that's been completed. But these are the top two teams in the SHL, in my opinion. They've been number one and number two on my hockey rankings for a long time. Of course, with GBN so many games in hand, they haven't really been at that number two slot in points all year, but they've been up there in points percentage.
Yeah, absolutely, Dylan. And you can tell these two teams, like I said, I'll sound like a broken record talking about these Wednesday matchups, but this is another matchup where these two teams play each other well. And this one specifically, I did feel like Nutria had more of an edge than the score says. I think GBN was just playing a lot of catch up throughout the majority of the game, but they had some guys step up. I mean, Theo Girothon has scored his first SHL goal of the season against the number one team in the state, so that's ought to feel good. And just overall, GBN's offense has been a worry on the season. Their defense plays solid. Raderman played solid. Nutrier still gets three by him, and that's enough. So, and by the way, just a overall fun game, fun broadcast. Obviously, we got to see our first ever broadcaster catching a puck. So if you heard the guy screaming on the color mic saying, "Oh my God, what a great!" Yeah, that was me. Max made the catch. My hand was right behind his, but that's a moment that I will never forget because I don't know if I'll ever see it again. You see it in baseball sometimes with foul balls, but with pucks out of play, you're not placed too close to the rink most times. But at Northbrook, they give you that little ledge. There's no netting. It's like a prime position to catch a puck, and Max Anderson got to enjoy that opportunity. So that was very cool and something obviously wanted to touch on as well.
So, Luke, what you're saying is that you were ready to catch it if Max didn't. You
Oh,
had your hand.
it was literally his hand was right here and my hand was right behind his.
Wow.
And I thought I caught it, but I couldn't feel any weight in my hand. I I looked down at Max's hand. Now we look up at each other, and then I was just like, "Oh my goodness!" Like because that was one of two or three pucks that came up towards our ledge. And must I mind you, SHL Network stuff is not cheap. We got a PC that is a puck away from breaking down. So that puck was a good 4 feet from it. So I'm glad we were A, able to catch it, and B, have it just miss that giant white box.
Yeah, Jimmy's got to start putting that thing under the table more often. But no, and then, sorry, let's move on to Thursday. Yes, Thursday, January 23rd. Another two games. Both of them saw the road team win 3-2 in a shootout. Let's start by talking about Carmel and Stevenson. And we'll get more into this type of discussion when we get to the standings. But at the time, this was a critical playoff race matchup between two teams fighting for that 8 seed. And both teams get at least a point, but Carmel takes the extra point on the road against Stevenson in the shootout. Deacon Rose tied this game late and had the shootout winner, of course, a former guest of ours here on the Scholastic Sitdown. And then in the second game on Thursday night, that was also a game of the week, not on YouTube. It was on Marquee Sports Network, of course. That was New Trier and Loyola. Both these teams entered this game on a 5 game winning streak. New Trier trying to sweep the season series from Loyola Gold here, but the Ramblers able to tie it in the third period and take it in a shootout, third round of the shootout, mind you, and that increased Loyola's winning streak to 6 consecutive SHL games. So they are getting hot at the right time, and I don't care where you are in the standings. When you beat New Trier, even if you're right below them, beating New Trier is always something to write home about.
Yeah, absolutely. That Loyola New Trier game was pure cinema. I mean, that game was on marquee for a good reason. Just being there, I wasn't a part of the broadcast exactly, but me and you were actually, you were running the rink clock itself, and I was running the broadcast clock. So
Yeah.
we were having some pretty good chemistry, I'd say. But yeah, no, that atmosphere, because you obviously got to live up to the hype of Centennial Ice Rink, where you have the biggest regular season game of the year between North South. That is very hyped to the max. And you know what? That place was pretty close to the numbers we saw back in November. Definitely not up at the exact, but they were getting up there. A lot of New Trier turnout. And Loyola, not a ton of students, but they were loud. They were showing heart. Hopefully, the hot mics didn't get too heated. And boy, Declan Smith, what a game. We actually we were planning on having Smith and Trapp on this podcast, but I don't we haven't been able to hear back from them yet, but we look forward to eventually getting a Loyola guest, which could hopefully be next week because we're still going to talk about that game because just if you watch that game back, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It is a pure like state playoff game type feel. It was an awesome experience to be at. And then going on the other thing of Carmel and Stevenson, this game was, I mean, with the situations, was as big as you could imagine. And Carmel, they just did it in heroic fashion. They get a power play in the last minutes of the game. Throughout their power play unit, Deacon Rose gets that game tying goal with 13 seconds left on the clock. They're outshot in overtime 4-1. And still, Steiner able to hold the fort down. They get it to shootout and they win. Not too often you see in a 2 game slate in one day that both go to a shootout, but we got that here.
Both go to a shootout, both for 3-2 final scores with the road
Oh,
team
that
winning. How
too.
about that? And
Gosh.
Luke, I know this is already going to be a long episode, so I'm going to try not to get too off topic too often, but in that New Trier Loyola game, I don't know who orchestrated this, but I love the fact that the student sections were on the sides that their team shot twice. And I know that usually, you're on the bench side, which I understand. I get that that's a thing, and I get why. But at the same time, if you're going to a Blackhawks game, you're looking for the tickets that the Hawks shoot twice at. I mean, I think that is just pure electricity. And even in the shootout, when they switch sides back and forth again after OT, you've got the shootout and they're shooting on their fan sides. I just like that a lot. And I wish more games saw that layout for fans. Again, I don't know who orchestrated that, but I thought it was a great idea.
Yeah, no, that's a good point you make. Because I was thinking that same thing. I was like, these student sections are not where they typically are. But like you said, it's kind of nice for the teams to score in the first and third and not have to make a whole trot across ice to their Sally spots. So I'm sure the players love it too. Maybe the goalies not so much, but we move on anyway.
Yeah. All right. Friday night, we had two games once again. We had the St. Viator Lions in against St. Ignatius, Battle of the Saints. As you mentioned, this was your personal game of the
Great
week last
name.
week. And a one goal game lived up to the hype. It was 4-3 in favor of St. Ignatius in this one. So they're also getting hot at the right time here in the season. And then down at Addison Ice Rink or Ice Arena, it was the York Dukes hosting the Lake Forest Scouts. York takes this one by a final score of 3-1. So two fun matchups between teams that are pretty evenly matched when you look at the standings, and both home teams come out on top.
Yeah, absolutely. And something about St. Ignatius and St. Viator, whenever they play each other, there's at least seven total goals or more. They give you a high-paced offensive battle that is always down to the wire. You saw it yourself back in December. I mean, it was every game of that series has been great. And on the other side for York, good old Friday night at Addison, two goals in that second period, and it proved to be enough in a very defensive game. I got to give a lot of credit to York's defensive crew. You talk about facing 26 shots, and Jack Brown stops 25 of them, and they held the Scouts to four shots in the third period to close things out. So, teams sometimes will let off the gas thinking they have the game in the bag, but clearly defensively they didn't, and I can imagine that York's blocking a ton of those shots as well.
All right, moving on to Saturday, another two games on the slate. First up, we had the York Dukes in against the St. Viator Lions. So both of these two teams playing the second leg of a back-to-back. York puts up two in the first period and hangs on all the way till the end for a 2-1 final score. They led shots 28 to 27, so just about as close of a game as you can get. But Ethan Maurer with the power play game-winning goal in the first period. And for York, this is a massive win in their playoff chase at the time. And then the second game was Glenbrook North at the Stevenson Patriots. And this was an interesting one, Luke, because when we talked about Stevenson's strength of schedule, we said it was going to be really hard for them because they're playing a lot of teams that are really close to the top of the standings, but they actually played a really good game in this one. They actually outshot GBN 29 to 28. They had a 2-0 lead in the first period before GBN grabbed one back, and then all the way until the third period, Spencer Goldman ties the game with 12 minutes to go. Jackson Sterner finds the game winner with 6:20 to go. That was on the power play as well. And GBN erases a 2-0 deficit on the road to pick up a crucial 2 points in the standings. And Luke, might I add, this was the first game all season that GBN was trailing at the start of the third period and turned it into a win.
Yeah, no, it's not easy to do. And what I'm seeing in these two games between York St. Viator, GBN Stevenson, one team is bending and one team is breaking. You look at bending, where the Dukes are up 2-0 after the first, and they only allow one goal in the next two periods thanks to Jack Brown stopping 26 out of 27. That's the definition of bending because you still grab the 2 points in regulation. You don't give St. Viator anything. Then you talk about Stevenson on the other side. They went up 2-0 early. GBN gets that first one, and then you you're expected to hang on for another 34 minutes between the second and third period, and that two-goal third is just huge for the Spartans as it's enough. So, it's okay to bend. Like I said, can't break, especially at this time of the year.
I like the terminology there, Luke, as we move into Sunday and actually our final five-game day in the SHL this season. And we've had a couple of these, and it's lots of fun to, have the maximum teams playing. And, no disrespect to Fenwick, but all 10 teams on Sunday were fighting for something, whether it be clinching the playoffs or seeding or something. No one's been locked into their spots yet as of Sunday. So let's go down the line here. I'll recap every game briefly, then we'll touch on what we want to. Loyola Gold at home against Carmel. This was a close game, 2-2 going into the third period before the game winner in the third period by Connor McCauley. Loyola wins this one, takes the season series 2-1. Lake Forest with their first true home game of the calendar year 2025 back at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. And they win this one 3-2 against the St. Viator Lions. And Luke, this is definitely an upset, but if you've been watching the SHL podcast all season long, it might not be as big of an upset as you think because of Lake Forest's incredible record on home ice. This one also is the fourth loss in a row for the St. Viator Lions, so they're going to have some stuff to look at going into the postseason. Then it was the York Dukes at home against New Trier at home against York. New Trier wins this one 6-1. It was actually 0-0 late into the second period, and then New Trier explodes for the 6-1 victory. Stevenson Patriots on the road against St. Ignatius. And this was a pivotal game. Our man Butch Connolly was broadcasting it as he does for all St. Ignatius games. And I've got a feeling that Lake Forest and York were both tuned into this one because had the St. Ignatius Wolfpack won the game, both York and Lake Forest would clinch the final two playoff spots. Well, Luke, that's exactly what happened. A 4-0 victory for the St. Ignatius Wolfpack. And then to close out the night, it was Glenbrook South against Glenbrook North. Big rivalry game. That series was tied 1-1 going into this one. GBN scores first. Glenbrook South ties it late in the second period. And then in the final minute, 50 seconds on the clock to be exact, Charlie Rosen, with his third goal of the season, takes the lead. Spartans add an empty netter, win it 3-1. So some late drama in that one, and GBN takes the season series. Luke, what stands out to you?
Well, I'd say three things. First off, Lake Forest, obviously that huge win against St. Viator. Of course, I'd like to speak positive, but for the Lions, it's gonna, you know, teams talk about playing at their best every game. It's not possible. And at this time of the year, you got to try to do that to your best extent. And I know you already clinched a playoff spot, but just losing these games will start to kind of take a bite at you mentally, and you got to just kind of stay strong. And I'm hoping the Lions can kind of turn things around because they are definitely one of my state favorites, and they're one of the state favorites. They're just the way they're playing in the SHL, they're going to have a high seed in the state playoffs just like they did last year. And you just don't want to fall apart at this time of the year. And then looking down the line, St. Ignatius playing on their senior night must be nice for company and Brody Netsky with a 24 save shutout, who is a senior himself. So congrats to Brody on that. And then, of course, I got to leave a quick point on that North-South game that GBN's defense has been incredible all season. And even in a big game like this, they're able to show it off and they close things out in the third period. And GBN's going to be feeling real nice about that one.
Yeah, it's not often that GBS puts up less than two goals in a game this season, but GBN's defense and goaltending are the perfect match. So, without further ado, speaking of Glenbrook North, we're going to turn it away to our guest segment, former Spartan and current SHL Network broadcaster Andrew Rubin. All right, and there he is, Andrew Rubin, our Week 18 guest. Andrew, former SHL player, current SHL Network broadcaster. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here. Finally, feel like I get my opportunity to be on the podcast. I'm so excited.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you. I'll start with this, Andrew. You are a former SHL player for the Glenbrook North Spartans. Just gonna keep it nice and simple and ask what were some of your favorite memories from your playing days?
Yeah, so I graduated from Glenbrook North in 2021. So my last year was that COVID year kind of ish where hockey wasn't allowed, but kind of was allowed. And that team honestly was probably one of the closest bonding experiences I've ever been on, just battling through all the adversity that it was through that year and still being able to put together a season and kind of almost become a family because of that was probably my favorite memory. Obviously, the teams earlier as well. Just the hockey experience that I had, I couldn't complain about at all.
And also going back to your playing days, you were a baseball player as well, and you now still currently are. You are playing college baseball at Columbus State. First off, how's the weather down there?
So we did have some snow recently. We played, I
Wow.
think the first snow football game on our field probably ever. Somebody would have to fact check me on that. But now the weather today was in the 60s. Opening day for us actually is Friday, January 31st. That's our first game. So we're really revving up for the season right now.
And my second point is you were previously a high school baseball and hockey player during this time of the year where baseball starts to ramp up and then hockey's getting into the point of playoffs. How are you able to juggle those two?
Yeah, when I first started doing it, it was a real culture shock, like having to prepare. You got to work with both your coaches, try to explain what's going on. But both the head coaches that I had, Evan Polkidis and Dominic Savino, they both were able to communicate with me constantly to figure out what worked best for me, so I could be the best player I could be, and they really helped out with that.
Well, you in recent years past, you were a staple on the SHL Network Game of the Week broadcast. Now that you're away at college, not as frequent, but you still found your way back to the booth a couple times this season. I just want to know, going from a player to a broadcaster, how did you get involved with the network, and what was your, early experiences in broadcasting?
Yeah, so it's actually a really funny story. The last game called by the SHL Network broadcast pre-COVID was the state quarterfinal game between my Glenbrook North team and Loyola Gold. And in that game, both Max Anderson and former SHL Network member Taylor Rammelt, shout out Taylor, said some very, very nice things about me on that broadcast that multiple people like texted me about after the game, and I felt like I had to go say thank you in some way. And then that's when the world shut down and I had no way of contacting them at all whatsoever. So I was waiting until the SHL network came back to Northbrook. And I made sure to go to that Glenbrook North game. It might have been against St. Viator or Stevenson. I'm not sure. Just Max was there and he was doing the game all alone. And I talked to Max before games as a player. Like we developed a little bit of a relationship. And then I was like, "Do you need any help?" Because I noticed he was doing the game all by himself, and he was like, "Can you do color commentary?" And I was like, "Absolutely." Like you can talk to Coach Evan. I was always kind of like a hockey IQ, like systems type person. And then I was like, by the way, in high school, I took sportscasting as my elective all the time. Shout out to the sportscasting teacher I had, Mrs. Holacek at Glenbrook North. She was awesome. And once that happened, I got to talking with Max, and it was right before the network really started to explode as well. And I first games, sideline reporter, they would just kind of work me in, and then from there it just took off.
Wow, that is a very cool story. So we're glad you shared that with us. And also, your younger brother is now one of the studs for the Spartans as well. Without saying everything, what have you taught him to have Daniel Rubin become the player he is today?
Uh, I'd say the biggest thing is it's all taught in my family. It's just the ability to compete. You know, do everything you can to not be denied, leave it all out there every chance you get. And I feel like he does that the best of his ability. Obviously, everybody always wants to nitpick, but I'm really proud of him and the player that he's become. And not only that, but the person he's become as well as a hockey player.
You talk about sports broadcasting in high school. Of course, I'm a Glenbrook South alum, so the district shares 88.5 FM WGBK. So, both schools do a great job at running that. I just wanted to share that because I can relate to that. But my question for you is, out of all the years broadcasting SHL Network, do you have a specific favorite game or favorite memory of just you being in the booth?
Oof. There's a lot. The games have just been so incredible that I feel like I've had the ability to call. I would actually say probably the favorite game that I ever got to call it was Sideline, the 2022 state playoffs, state quarterfinal game between Stevenson and St. Ignatius. It was the year Stevenson won the state championship. And that was two teams, and it was the most anticipated quarterfinal matchup. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is gonna be the closest one," and they just went back and forth with each other. I believe it was Rafi Biedron scored the game winner in
I
overtime,
think you're
and being
right.
on the bench, both benches that game, it was the atmosphere was incredible.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I actually remember that game to a T, and I remember that goal call in overtime from Max was just absolutely
It
electric.
was perfection. That goal
Yes,
call
it
from
was.
Max was perfection.
Beyond my time, fellas.
Yeah.
But other than that, I like to always finish off my last question, even with former players. Pre-game meal, did you ever go to?
I really didn't. I'm not somebody that was like super into that. It would just kind of be whatever was there, whether it be pasta, whether it be a hamburger, anything like that. I was not a really superstitious guy. As a player, both with baseball and hockey, I know they're both very superstitious sports, but I'm not. I'm not really that type of person.
Really?
Well, last question for me, Andrew, is, obviously we miss you as more of a regular for the SHL Network broadcast, but I understand that you've continued on broadcasting at school. So what have you been up to lately in terms of sports broadcasting?
Yeah, so here during the fall season, I am the announcer for the girls soccer team here at Columbus State. They had a very dominant season to say the least. I think they lost in the national final four. But also I have the ability to talk to the broadcaster that does both the baseball games, so my games, and he does the basketball games here as well. His name's Scott Miller. And he is a very accomplished broadcaster, very experienced, tremendous broadcaster as well. So getting to pick his brain all the time, that's something I love to do and really help me, even though I'm not studying broadcasting here. I still feel like I'm getting that experience and gaining more as a broadcaster.
That's awesome. So glad to see, it's more than just a hobby, you're continuing on down at school. But Luke, anything else or?
I think we capped it all. It's been a pleasure to have you on, Andrew.
Thank you guys for having me. It was an absolute blast.
All right, yeah. Thanks again, Andrew. And with that, we'll go right into our outside of the SHL look. All right, good talk with Andrew Rubin. So now, without further ado, I will give my partner here, Luke, the floor as we take a look outside of the SHL. And with all of our main leagues that we cover concluding their regular season, we have our playoff matchups locked in. Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely, Dylan. And, we're going to cover the three leagues that we typically do today. The Metro Girls Hockey League is still closing things out, so it's tough to keep track with right now. But in the North Central, the Chicago Catholic, and the West, we have our playoff matchups. And to put a fun little twist on this, I'll make things quick, I promise. I'm going to give my prediction of who's going to win as well. Just the first round for now. Let's hop over to the North Central as we typically start things off with. Number one seed will be Evanston taking on number eight Highland Park. Give me Evanston. They've been great this season. In the second quarterfinal, it's BGHW and Prep. And how funny this ends up being a former D211 chief myself, that is within a close realm of those two teams, or at least used to be. I know that those two teams really do not like each other. So it's going to be a fun rivalry matchup. I do think Prep's going to put on a good fight, but BGHW is one of my combined state favorites. Gave me the Stampede to BGHW. Third quarterfinal, Chicago North is the higher seed at 3. Number 6, Notre Dame is their opponent. I think Chicago North is going to handle things just fine over there. And then we have Deerfield and New Trier Blue. Deerfield being the 4, New Trier Blue being the 5. It's a tough thought, but I really do think New Trier Blue has a chance. They have a very deep team and they've exposed some of these higher seeds. You even look at that game against Chicago North where they beat them 5-1 on Marquee. I think New Trier Blue is very undervalued just because they're a varsity too, but they have the talent to play with a lot of varsity teams. So there's our four matchups for the top eight teams, the varsity champions, tier one bracket in the North Central. Let's look over to the CCHL real
Well,
quick.
Luke, before you do that,
Go
I'm
ahead.
going to make a rare butt-in during the outside the SHL segment. You said New True Blue is the 5 seed, right?
Correct.
Feels like every week when we have your update from the North Central, they've been number one
Yeah.
all season long. But I remember you talking about how close the points were. So can you tell me what the range of points were from first to fifth?
Let's take a look at the final standings in the regular season, because they are tight, Dylan. Oh my goodness. Evanston number one with 40, BGHW number two with 37, Chicago North number three with 36, Deerfield number four with 35, and New Trier Blue number five with 34. So
Man.
from two to five, it's 1 point down, going
And
down. So oh my
what I
goodness.
think is even more impressive about that is that after all of that, there were no ties to be broken. It was all determined
Yeah,
by points.
yeah, that's a good point you make. Hmm. All right, CCHL. Wow. Bennett lost a game, by the way. They're now 17-1. They will have the number one seed, but in their last game of the season, they couldn't score a goal, and the Fenwick Friars end their undefeated CCHL season 1-0 game over there. Here's a look at the seeding. Bennett will be number one playing against number eight, St. Rita. Give me the Red Wings of Bennett, no doubt about it. Number two versus number seven is the St. Ignatius Wolfpack versus the Marmion Cadets. This is a top heavy conference. I do think St. Ignatius is going to take care of business over there. Now, this is where things get spicy. Number three versus number six, it's Brother Rice versus Providence Catholic. This is going to be my first upset pick. I do think Brother Rice is very good, but Providence Catholic has been very slept on all season. So give me the underdog in that one. And then the 4-5 is Fenwick at number four, Notre Dame at number five. And these two teams have been tight in their respective season series. I do think the Friars will prevail nonetheless. Looking over to the West now, our final division. We're going to go 1-8, 2-7, 3-6, 4-5 once again. Number one seed, just leading by 1 point, are the defending state champion Warriors. 21-5, 61 points, because two of those wins in overtime. They'll be taking on number eight Naperville. I do think this is going to be a much closer game than people anticipate, or much closer series, should I say, but still, give me the Warriors. Number two versus number seven is Plainfield versus the DuPage Stars. And Plainfield, I mentioned it last episode, having won the best season in their organization's career. So give me Plainfield. Number three versus number six is Maine versus Lincoln Way. And we mentioned last week as well about how good Lincoln Way has been. One of the teams they have ran over in the last couple weeks is Maine. So how about they run over them in this series? Give me the underdog number six, Lincoln Way. Then it's a 4-5 matchup between Glenbard and OPRF. OPRF has slowly gotten better throughout the season. Glenbard has kind of stayed at a happy medium. Give me the Huskies of OPRF with another upset in that one. And next week, I'll have a little bit more confidence to make some championship picks. But for now, that's all I'm going to leave things with, just for our time's sake, because we still got a lot of hockey to talk about.
Yeah, and Luke, before we close out this segment, I think that this is as good of a time as any after we discuss all those teams to officially unveil what we've got planned for Thursday this week on the 30th at 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time here in the Chicago area. It'll be us two, along with Sam Schwartz, who we had as a guest earlier this season, with the first ever high school state tournament seed reveal show, and we are both pumped, and Sam is too. In years past, it would just get sort of posted on the website, almost not even with an announcement prior. Just
Yeah.
someone realizes it's on the website, and then word of mouth spreads, and then everyone's checking it out. But for the first time, we are going to reveal all of the seeds and brackets live on air in a show style format, Selection Sunday style, if you will. And we'll be breaking down the girls combined and red division brackets. And that will be your first source of knowing where your team is seated and who you're going to play first round, as it won't be posted on the website till the following morning. So make sure get your watch parties scheduled with your teammates and families and coaches alike, because it's going to be a spectacle and we can't wait for it. That's Thursday, this Thursday, the 30th at 6 o'clock p.m. So
Yeah,
having
best
said
believe
that, yeah, go ahead.
you better be there because this is going to be a cool experience, and I'm gonna try to outdress my fellow hosts and Sam and Dylan. I'll be
Oh,
rocking a nice little suit and tie, so
okay,
it's a
okay.
serious topic, so I have no idea what you're wearing yet. So now that I told you, you're probably
Now,
gonna
yeah,
wear a
now that
suit.
you told me, I've got something planned.
Whatever, I
But
spoiled
you
things. But
know, with that said, we do know the seeds, so we're not going to tell you on this podcast, and we're not going to tell
don't you do it
anyone
like that.
ever until Thursday. But we know them, so just to tease you a little bit there. But without further ado, that'll do it for Outside the SHL. Probably the longest edition of Outside the SHL we've had so far on
Seriously,
the podcast.
worth
So
it.
we're going to move it along to the standings. So in first place with 42 points is New True Green. They still have 4 games remaining in their schedule, so lots of room for improvement there in terms of number of points. Sitting in second place for now, Loyola Gold, 41 points on the season, so only one behind New True Green. Only 2 games remaining though, so we'll see what happens there. In third place, Glenbrook North, 38 points on the season, still 5 games to play. So in theory, if they go 5 for 5 in these last 5, they can finish with 48. So this is going to be really interesting to see what happens there. St. Ignatius in fourth with 38 points as well, but only 2 games remaining. So Glenbrook North takes the tiebreaker for the time being, and they won the season series anyway over St. Ignatius. St. Viator drops all the way down to fifth after this week of losing those 4 straight games, as they were in third for a long time this season with 37 points, only 1 game left on their schedule here before this regular season comes to an end. Glenbrook South in sixth place. They have 33 points, 3 games remaining. York in seventh place with 26 points, 2 games remaining. And Lake Forest in eighth with 26 points and 1 game remaining. So just a couple key talking points I'm going to get here before you chime in, Luke. First of all, we know that York and Lake Forest will be 7 and 8. We just don't know who's going to be who, but mathematically no way for either of them to finish higher than seventh. So that's a direct 1v1 battle here in this last week of the season. We do know that Nutri Green and Loyola Gold have both clinched home ice advantage in the first round of the playoffs, as they have secured themselves a top 4 finish. And my last talking point is the Coaches Trophy, of course, awarded to the SHL regular season champion. Currently, there are only 3 teams mathematically in contention for this. That's New Trier Green, Loyola Gold, and Glenbrook North. So those 3 teams will have a battle here to see who's going to finish number 1 overall in the SHL. And while it is a championship coaches trophy, it's also guarantees you home ice advantage throughout the entire SHL playoffs, and just being the 1 seed overall in the SHL, which is the best league in the state, is something to write home about. So, Luke, what stands out to you here?
Ooh, two things. First off, York and Lake Forest at that 7 and 8 seed because you know New Trier has handled below 500 teams very well this season. I do think you could catch Loyal off guard. The odds are ridiculously small, but those 2 teams are fighting for who has to play the number 1 team in the state as of right now, and who has to play another very good team that also just beat the number 1 team in the state. I would still rather play the Loyola Ramblers, although they're hot. You could maybe catch them off guard, but either way, for York and Lake Forest, it's going to be tough for them, but congrats to them on still making the playoffs. And man, York around this time is a team you don't want to mess with as it is. So we'll see how they, reflect that into February and March this year. And then the other thing I want to look at is St. Ignatius is really rooting on Glenbrook North to lose out if possible or lose a majority of their games because that 3-4 fight is also getting very intense as well. St. Ignatius could also catch up to Loyola as well if they win both their games and Loyola loses out with their last two games, grabbing no points out of that. Because I would much rather have the 3 seed than the 4 seed because you're talking about playing a team like Glenbrook South, who has struggled and grabbed a lot of their points in overtime. They have the most overtime losses on the year compared to a St. Viator team that is in a slump right now, but if they get back in the rhythm, they're one of the best in the state. So those little spots can mean so much in these final games. And what I'm saying could absolutely be wrong. I'm not claiming I'm right. Just looking at how these teams have played this season, there are some drop-offs between some, number of points, and you'd rather play the team that has less points.
Well, Luke, I'm going to go ahead and say something. I'm not sure if you knew this, but there's been something a little weird in the SHL in the last few years about the 3 versus 6 matchup. In the post-COVID era, which is now 3 complete seasons, this being the fourth, the 6 seed has beaten the 3 seed in the quarterfinals all 3 seasons. Glenbrook South beat Stevenson in 2022. Loyola beat Stevenson in 2023 and St. Ignatius beat Glenbrook South in 2024. So you never know if we're going to see another 6 versus 3 upset. It's what's that March Madness seed that always seems to crack an upset? Is it the
Ooh, depends
the
on the year.
13 versus 4 or something? There's one that's like
13's definitely got a good chance. The 15 somehow pull something off every year.
yeah.
But yeah,
So
no,
that's the
it's
SHL's version of that. But
nothing's given. Nothing's given. That's for sure. And it's a good point you make because I remember that last year, but the years prior, I totally forgot about that. It's a good reminder you make that numbers really don't matter. It's what you put out there. So that's why the SHL playoffs are so exciting.
yeah, so make sure you follow the standings. There's going to be a lot of movement this week in the SHL playoffs. And also just going to throw this out there for maybe some of you at home that are not that tuned in to high school hockey. There are, of course, two different playoffs for high school hockey. There's the playoffs within your own league and the state playoffs. And it's not like, college basketball where you have your conference tournaments and then the winner of the conference tournament clinches a spot. Every team, pretty much every team that wants to be in the state tournament will be in the state tournament. But
Yep.
the SHL playoffs, while it's not as big of a, you know, prize as the state playoffs, is still very meaningful to say that you won the best, you were the best team in your league. So
And the toughest league in the state. I mean, the
right.
numbers don't lie.
Yeah, and with the best 2 out of 3 series as well, that's also something to watch out for. So we're gonna move it right along here into uh our week preview, starting with tonight. And not sure if this is gonna come out tonight or tomorrow early in the day, depending on what we have time for the editing. But we have a game tonight, which is Tuesday. That is Glenbrook North versus Stevenson. That game will be played at Twin Rinks, but it's one of those where Glenbrook North is the home team because this was a made up game and there wasn't any ice time at Northbrook. So Stevenson is home, but GBN has the home bench. And we just talked about this matchup last week being closer than a lot of people thought. So it's going to be interesting what we see tonight. And Luke, I know it's Tuesday, but since we are recording this day of, I think we got to make some predictions.
Yeah, I think so. And Stevenson's got a good chance to play spoiler here with the Spartans. You know, they got nothing else to play for when it comes to the SHL season, but it's a good chance for them to work on systems, work on power plays, try different things. So with that being said, I don't think Glenbrook North will lose this game. It could very much be close once again, but I'm gonna go, you know what? I'm probably awfully wrong here. I'm gonna go 6-2 Spartans.
6-2 Spartans, okay. I am just for fun. I'm gonna say that Stevenson played a close game against GBN last time. I think they get over the hump this time. Now that, they have, quote, nothing to lose because they're eliminated from the SHL playoffs. I think Stevenson takes a gritty one, 2-1 tonight. So we'll see if either of us are correct. And Luke, you absolutely sniped it last time. So we'll see if you get it right this time.
Good times. I'm 1 for 1, but you're ruining my percentage now.
All right, moving along to Wednesday, we have 3 games on tap, starting with the Glenbrook South Titans at home against Stevenson. So Stevenson playing a back-to-back against the Glenbrook teams. The Titans and Stevenson Patriots play each other very close when they match up. Stevenson winning the first matchup 1-0, GBS taking the second one 3-2. Then we've got Carmel Catholic in against Glenbrook North. That one will start at 3:20. Also some close games played between GBN and the Corsairs. And finally, we have New Trier Green at Lake Forest at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. And Luke, if you remember all the way back to SHL opening night on September 11th, it was New Trier Green at Lake Forest, and that is how the Scouts will close out their regular season. So Wednesday night, the Scouts will be the first team to hit that 30 games played mark in the SHL.
Yeah, and it's going to be a fun 3 day slate or 3 game slate in a day in general. I mean, GBS and Stevenson could very much play each other tight. GBN's got another home game. This time they're actually at home against the Corsairs. And watch out. I think Lake Forest could very much beat New Trier. We're talking about how they're in that crucial battle for seeding. New Trier's in the battle for the coach's trophy. Whether it's Stevenson against GBN today or yesterday, if you're seeing this on Wednesday, and Lake Forest New Trier the day after, I find a good chance that one of those teams could play spoiler and start to take a team slightly out of contention for that coach's trophy.
Good point, Luke. All right. Thursday, we have one game. It's the St. Ignatius Wolfpack on the road against the Stevenson Patriots. So the Patriots on home ice again, but actually on the home bench this time. And, I just want to first give out a formal apology to St. Ignatius and Stevenson that they will not be able to watch the SHL bracket reveal show live. But at the end of the day, during this time of year, there's a game every night. So we had to pick one, and Thursday was the best night. But this will be an interesting matchup as these two teams just played each other with the Wolfpack winning 4-0. Maybe we'll see something different this time.
It's funny because you led into that, and I was like, "What is he talking about?" And I saw 5:50 on a Thursday. I was like, "Oh, okay, now I understand it now." But yeah, St. Ignatius handled Stevenson well last time. I wouldn't be shocked if they do the same. But not to sound like a broken record, but any game is a game that any team can take 2 points from. So we'll see how that one pans out.
All right, moving along to Friday, we've got the York Dukes at home. Classic Friday night ice slot. We say it every time as they host the Fenwick Friars. That will be Fenwick's final game of the SHL regular season, becoming the second team to close out their schedule. And then at 8:15 p.m. at North Shore Ice Arena, it is New Trier Green versus Glenbrook North in meeting number 2 of the SHL season series. And with New Trier Green taking that first one 3-2, GBN is going to be hungry to respond.
Oh, absolutely. And this is a season series where I could very much see it being coming down to that rubber match for that rescheduled game that will just have the third period. There's no other way I could see it happening to whereas New Trier wins the first matchup, Glenbrook North wins the second matchup, and all of a sudden their rubber match is a game of 1 period remaining with New Trier with a 1 goal lead. So make it happen, Spartans. That would be quite awesome.
Yeah, I would love that. And then moving along to Saturday, we've got Glenbrook South at home against Loyola Gold. That one's at 6:30 p.m. And we have the Glenbrook North Spartans at home against the York Dukes. And the Dukes here, this is their last game of the regular season for them. And two interesting ones. Another one of those, both Glenbrook's at home nights. And so we'll see some pretty good ones here.
Yeah, and we mentioned last week about how GBN's going to be playing that catch up. We're seeing it now. They're occupied nearly every day this week. But on the other side of things, I kind of like this little Saturday Sunday slate because Loyola and GBS are going to have a college hockey type schedule where they play 2 games in 2 days against each other. So going on over to Sunday, that could be fun. Those two teams might get sick of each other, but we'll see how it pans out.
Yep, and then Sunday, the final day of the regular season for a lot of these teams, except for two. We'll get to that. But Glenbrook South in against Loyola again, as you just mentioned, Luke. That one at 6 p.m. at Heartland. Then at 7 o'clock p.m. at Fifth Third Arena, it's New Trier and St. Ignatius. And also at 7, simultaneous start time, It's Mount Prospect Ice Arena with St. Viator at home against the Carmel Corsairs. And that Nutra Green St. Ignatius game going to be a very interesting one when it comes to standings, especially with what you were talking about with those points and that race for the coaches trophy. Nutra Green, you know, I think every game on this Sunday slate and really the Saturday Sunday slate is going to be popcorn worthy.
Absolutely. And it also made me think Glenbrook South and Loyola playing again. This is a very high potential playoff matchup. And these two teams are already going to meet each other twice. So these games are, of course, important for the standings. But if Loyola ends up the three and Glenbrook South ends up the number six seed, I think what these teams take out of these two games and what they can kind of adjust for the playoffs is going to be crucial for both sides. And on the other side of things, New Trier, St. Ignatius, that's going to be my personal game of the week just because I think St. Ignatius is looking forward to try to beat New Trier again, something that they haven't been able to do in the regular season. They lost 4-3 and 3-2, but they did beat them in that O'Grady Cup Championship. So and that was another one goal game that we saw together, Dylan. So just because of how tight the season series has been between those two teams, that's my personal game of the week.
All right. And then finally on Monday, which we're still counting as this week, because why not? At
Yeah.
9 o'clock p.m., North Shore Ice Arena, the game finally gets rescheduled between Glenbrook North and New Trier Green. As we mentioned, it is already 2-1 New Trier Green at the start of the third period. So New Trier Green gives up one of their practice slots, I would assume, to have this period and they have to get refs all the way over. I'm wondering if the refs are getting paid for a full game. I don't know any of that stuff, but we do know that this game will only take place if it matters. So if everyone's already locked in mathematically to their playoff positioning, they will cancel this. But Sam Schwartz ran his model. He was telling me over the phone, and he says he has concluded there's an 83% chance that this game will matter. So just throwing that out there. And who knows, Luke, as you mentioned, if GBN able to beat New Trier in that game on Friday night, you just never know. And the winner of this game could easily be the winner of the Coach's Trophy. So we might get sort of an unofficial Coach's Trophy championship game, which again is only one period.
Yeah. And it makes me think there's no way that we are recording on Monday next week because we need to know what happens with this game. So our next episode is going to be with the regular season finish, which is something exciting to look forward to. And I just, wow, these are going to be some interesting conditions that these players have never really been in before. You get all prepped up like you're playing a full game, but you are emptying the tank for 17 minutes. Like that's going to be the hardest working period both those teams have ever played in their lives. It's going to be a very good showcase of condensed SHL hockey.
Luke, that's actually a really good point that I hadn't considered is that you're able to give it a little bit more energy than you would normally because all you're gonna have to do is play that third period and maybe overtime and a
Maybe
shootout.
overtime, yeah.
But yeah, that's probably going to go on record as the longest second period intermission in Illinois high school hockey history, as that game was originally September 27th. So this is not even a
My
game that was
gosh.
mid-season. This was September. We're talking like two, three teams haven't even played game one of the regular season yet at this point. This is going to be really interesting. So with
And one more thing, something interesting to note, these two teams will have to play with the same roster they had. So if there's injuries or something, that could play a big role as well. I didn't look too deep into that, but just a thought to close things out.
Luke, that's a really good point you bring up. So we'll have to track that as we get closer. But without further ado, we'll bring it into our final segment. All right, so without further ado, let's talk question of the week and trivia. But first, we'll talk about last week's question of the week and trivia. And our man Dana Loken actually chimes in with not only the trivia answer, but also an answer to the question of the week. So, Luke, your question was, who is a guest that you would like to see on the podcast before the end of the season?
Did Dana say him?
Yeah, well, I think that's actually a really good idea. We should have Dana
That
on
would be
at
awesome.
some point during the playoffs. That would be really interesting. I know his son plays on GBN JV, so maybe we could talk a little JV SHL playoffs. But he answers, Coach Stein was fantastic, so he agreed with that. Next, you guys need to have Mr. 600 and SHL president Evan Polakidis
No
on.
doubt about it.
I think that guest we are saving for a little deeper into the playoffs, kind of talk about the league and the state rankings and all that. But Evan Polakidis is quite a character, and we all love him here on the SHL network, obviously. So we will absolutely have Evan on. Don't you worry, Dana. You just gotta wait for that interview, but that's coming. And then the trivia question was until the game that they played last week, how many days were in between GBN and Nutria's last completed three-period SHL game? Luke, the answer was 370, and Dana hit it right on the head. 370, and that is incredible to think about. That's over a year.
Yeah, and ladies and gentlemen, Dana's back.
He's back all right. Now he saw the comments were on this time and he didn't waste any time with that. So, all right. Now we'll talk about this week. And again, make sure you leave your answers down below as soon as you can. Otherwise, Dana's going to beat you to it. So the question of the week, Luke, I'm going to ask you, and I guess I'll preface this by saying, if you remember the SHL quarterfinals last season, game one and two were all held at Heartland as sort of that neutral site before the further rounds of the playoffs. That format is not returning this year, so we're going back to how it was the year before of home away home. So the question of the week is, did you like the quarterfinal format last year, or are you happy that it's going back to home and away?
So I like that it's going back to high seed gets the two games at home because you work hard to get that high seed. And if you're just giving game three, who knows? But I didn't hate the idea of playing all at one location. You talk about teams just back to back to back to back. That was good for our purposes getting those broadcasts in. It was a busy day for the people that were in that production, but also it gives a conference championship feel when it comes to any other collegiate sport. To whereas you're playing at a neutral site and you're playing out the tournament from start to finish at a neutral site. With that being said, I mean, you can't beat home atmospheres and just having all the fans, students local. I am just so much more of a fan of the home and home.
Yeah, Luke, I'm gonna have to agree with you, but like you said, there really are good points on each side.
Yes.
To be able to, wrap up your game and then stick around and watch the next two, or maybe vice versa. While you're getting ready for your game, you get to watch the OT of the game before or something like that. But at the end of the day, the my biggest argument for the home away home is that you have the state playoffs at a neutral site, right? From the
Yes.
quarterfinals and onwards. This year it's at West Meadows. In previous years, it was at the Edge Ice Arena. But playing on home ice, playing home and away games, I think has always been part of the SHL playoffs charm and what separates it from the state tournament. So for that reason, being my main reason, I do like that we are returning to the home away home style. Does it cause a little bit more of a headache for the schedulers? Maybe. But still, I think it's the way to go. So
Yeah.
that is my answer there. And we're going to close things out with your trivia question of the week. So, Dana, this is your time to shine. What was the longest playoff overtime game in SHL history? So, of course, in the playoffs, we have endless OT, no shootouts, and this is varsity only. So, varsity SHL, what was the longest playoff overtime game in history? And that is your trivia question. Leave your comment down below. First person to get it right will get a shout out. At this point, if you get it right, we'll give you a shout out, even if you weren't the first person to get it right, because we need some more people down in that comment section.
Next thing you know, you're just gonna have 50 people copying and pasting Dana's answer.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like not even typing it out themselves. Yeah, that's true. But that's gonna do it for episode number 18. And Luke, I cannot believe that the next time we will be talking, we will be previewing playoff matchups It's it really is insane how much time flies.
No, it's really cool just because you remember episode one, just kind of how mishmash it was, and it was like start of the season and season's ending. I mean, we got playoffs, but playoffs roll by so fast because they're so fun. So it's uh
Exactly.
it's always an honor, and I'm glad we've been able to run this consistently for so long. What we've missed 1 week, and we only missed 1 week because we were going to anyway because there was no hockey to cover.
Right.
We've covered every week. I mean, that's it's different than playing games, but it's still an Iron Man streak of our own.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that every single game in the SHL this season, you can go on YouTube and see what Dylan Ward and Luke Jordan had to say about it.
Unless Sam screwed it up in the schedule.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. Well, that's going to finish episode number 18. That's Luke Jordan. I'm Dylan Ward. We hope you enjoyed. We will see you next week after the SHL regular season comes to an end and we know our playoff matchups. Till then, enjoy the last week of the chaos, everyone.